Welcome, Bent Riders around the world. My name is Gary Solomon, and you're watching the Laidback Bike Report. Well, how's everybody doing today? We are so glad to have you on the Laidback Bike Report today. Another jam-packed show to tell you about. Let me give you a list of what you are about to see. We have, kicking it off, Galla, our news reporter, talking about a number of travelers and a couple of new products. It's a really good report. I think you guys will like that. Our main segment today involves Doug Davis, Mr. Wizard himself. We're going to be talking about the legal labyrinth of riding 3- and 4-wheel recumbents in the USA. There's all kinds of knotty issues involved with the laws involved around the country. We're going to get into all of it, and I think you'll find it interesting. We're going to ask your help in getting some things changed as well. And how about buying and selling a used recumbent? Now, this is something many of us have done, and we're going to dive into it a little bit with some experts, some people who run classified sites for buying and selling, and see if we can't hone the process a little bit and make it easier for all of us. Then Larry Varney is going to join us. Larry and I had a great opportunity to travel to Grand Rapids, Michigan a few weeks ago, up to the headquarters of TerraTrike. They have a brand new speedster they call the Spyder, and we had an opportunity to check it out for a couple of days. Larry's going to have a review on that later in the show, so stay tuned for that. Peter Stull, the bicycle man, is with us. He's going to be loading more recumbent trikes, I believe, into more vehicles. Show you about that, and he'll have a few other things to talk about there too. And Denny Voorhees, of course, with us with the sports report. All right, let's bring everybody on stage. Let me introduce you to my crew, the folks who make this show possible. And we, of course, have our director from Colorado Springs, Colorado. It's Larry Seidman. Hi, Larry.
Hey, Gary and everybody else.
And good to have you with us. And down in Jackson, Mississippi, it is Trey Burgoyne doing the media today. Hey, Trey.
Howdy, folks. Good to be here.
And the aforementioned Larry Varney is in Cold Spring, Kentucky, dressed like red green, it looks like. Larry, how you doing?
Howdy. Keep your stick on the ice.
And let's see, not in Florida, but up in Pennsylvania currently, we have Denny Voorhees, our sports director. Hi, Denny.
Yeah, Center Square and I don't know, the Brady Bunch or the Benny Bunch maybe today.
Could be, yeah. We'll all be
There's
pointing up and down and all that.
Yeah.
Good to have you with us, Denny. And in Big D, Dallas, it is Doug Davis, the wizard of velomobiles and all sorts of bents. Doug, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Gary.
Good to have you with us. Looking forward to our segment coming up. And back with us again is Nina Paley. Hi, Nina. How you doing?
Howdy. It's good to be back.
Yeah, Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. And let's see, ensconced in the deep freeze, it looks like, the bicycle man, Peter Stull. Did you forget the heat bill, or what happened there?
No, we is my sound echoey there?
Yeah, we hear you. You paid the electric bill apparently. So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah. We turn the thermostat down to 50, not 5 when we're closed. So I wear an extra layer. You know, like Scrooge. It's a garment. It's durable.
Right.
Not like natural gas that's temporary. Yeah, and global warming.
Like all of the bikes and trikes that you sell there. So
well, right. and the proprietor is pretty simple too. Yeah.
hopefully durable as well. So,
Well,
all right,
there you
guys,
go.
thank you all so much. It's always a pleasure to have you guys with us. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about what makes this show interactive, and it's the live chat, either on Facebook or on YouTube. We really appreciate you guys chiming in. You can have conversations with your fellow Bent Riders. You can make comments about the show, or even ask questions of our guests, all on live chat. So please avail yourself of that, and let us know where you are watching from. Now, you can support the Laidback Bike Report by liking us on Facebook, subscribing to us on YouTube, and clicking that little white eye right up there. It will take you to the Laidback Bike Report website, where you can find lots of information about what we've had on in the past, what's coming up, all kinds of auxiliary stuff in there. So check out our website as well. And if you can, become a Patreon patron. All the folks you see in the pictures behind me have done so. We love our Patreon patrons, so it's a great way to support us for as little as $1 a month. So we'd appreciate that. All right, guys. Now, supporting us in important ways also are our sponsors, and let me tell you about them right now. First of all, it is TerraCycle, makers of exquisite recumbent parts and accessories for your bent, and Trailside Trikes, a fine recumbent trike shop on the Withlacoochee Trail in Florida and now in Knoxville, Tennessee as well. And Cruise Bike, designed for the cyclist who wants to ride farther, climb faster, and adventure more. All cruise bikes and frame sets ship free in the USA. And TerraTrike Green Speed, the best in leisure performance, adventure, touring, electric, and portability. Wherever your adventure leads, TerraTrike will take you there. And Green Speed, where Ian Sims designs bring performance through science and engineering. And Laidback Cycles, the top USA dealer for TerraTrike and the premier source for CatTrike, Ice, and Green Speed. We give you the freedom to ride. And Recumbent CycleCon. We've postponed the 2021 Recumbent CycleCon, but please join us on October 8th and 9th, 2022 at the Montgomery County Fairgrounds in Dayton, Ohio. More info at recumbentcyclecon.com. All right, guys, let's kick it right off today. First with our news report and Honza Galla. Larry, let's have a look at Honza's report.
Hello, everybody. Honza Galla from Recumbent News here again with another set of news items for you from the last month. There haven't been many of them. Basically, the only important one is that Hansen Bikes has introduced several new products or improved products. So first of all, it is the new turn signal system, which should improve the visibility in the traffic and can be installed on the back of the seat of a recumbent seat or on the seat of the Hansen Pino, the tandem. Another new item is a set of bags for the recumbent seat. So a small one, and then a bigger one, and it has a magnetic system which you use to attach the bag to the back of the seat, and it looks great and functional. So it is a big step. An improvement. And what I like most is probably the fully adjustable headrest from them. Well, you can imagine a fully adjustable headrest in a way, but this is really adjustable in many other ways than you would expect. I think it's the biggest news from them. And the last one is an improved fairing, basically for the Haseketwiesel for their tadpole trike. So it's also an interesting one. You know for sure that I like and I really love the Recumbent Travels. And although it is a bit of a surprise in the COVID time, there are at least 3 expeditions going on at the moment, recumbent expeditions, but no, at least 4. First is Gwenile Breton riding his solar-powered trike through the eastern part of Russia at the moment, so through frozen Siberia, and his plan is to get to Vladivostok and then row over the Pacific Ocean to San Francisco, then cycle his trike again over the United States, and then row again across the Atlantic Ocean. So he is basically circumnavigating the northern hemisphere. His solar-powered trike can be converted into a tent, so he not only rides the trike but also sleep in it, which is interesting, and I really recommend to follow him. Another, this time a couple traveling, is Irina and Radu, originally from Romania, but they have spent quite some time in Australia. They are now circumnavigating Australia on their 2 trikes. Surprisingly, in a way, Radu is riding just a pedal-powered trike, but Irina has a solar-powered trike as well as Gwenel. They have a very nice posts on both Facebook and Instagram, so definitely worth following as well. A third one is Viktor Zicho. You definitely know him because of his trip on a old M5 recumbent from Hungary to India about a year ago, when he crossed countries like Afghanistan, was caught by police in Pakistan, and finally went to quarantine for several weeks in India, but reached his goal. And I did an interview with him, so you can find it on Recumbent News. Currently, Victor is trying to cycle from Hungary to North Cap, which is the touristic northernmost point of Europe. And so he's riding through winter Norway at the moment with temperatures way below 0 degrees of Celsius, so freezing temperatures. Again, very nice photos, very nice report on Instagram mainly. And we have Mark Havran, a Canadian guy, Czech origin, which I like, actually, riding his solar-powered recumbent around Canada and USA as a test ride, basically, to his round-the-world solar bike trip he plans to do in the next years. So this time he is about to cycle 7,000 kilometers, which is 4,300 miles. And I hoped that I would be able to report also about a very interesting trip of Tommy Quick, an Australian young stroke survivor who was on his quest to reach 4 points of Australia, the westernmost, southernmost, easternmost, and northernmost one, for stroke awareness, and also to raise $1 million Australian dollars to help stroke survivors get back to their lives. Unfortunately, I have realized today he was hit by a car on the November 17, is in hospital at the moment because he was seriously injured. I definitely wish him as fast recovery as possible so he can back on the road and into his life as soon as quickly as possible. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the Laidback Bike Report today. Bye from me for now.
Thank you so much, Honza. So yeah, we wish him a quick recovery as well. That's horrible that he was struck. Also, that the guy riding in Norway through the winter on a two-wheeled recumbent, that is scary stuff. And if you noticed, riding with one hand because his other hand was holding the camera. So some great recumbent adventurers there. So Honza, that's great. We appreciate it. Honza couldn't be with us today. He was doing a community theater playing Darth Vader, I believe. Trey, do we have a shot of, there he is. There's Honza in his costume today. So Honza, we really appreciate all you do for us, and good luck in the play. So, all right, guys, let's enough nonsense. Let's get on with the main segment here of the show. We're going to now take a very close look at some very interesting legal issues involved with riding your recumbents. Mostly 3 and 4 wheel recumbents is what we're talking about, but you'll find even a couple of 2-wheel recumbents may be in question here as well. So we're going to do this segment. Mostly this was put together by Doug, and so he's going to kick it off here with a little intro. So Doug's going to talk to you about what's coming up, and then we'll have a few legal experts to talk to us also about these issues. So Larry, let's kick it off here.
Hey, this is Doug again, and we have talked about this before on the show many times, but now we're going to get really detailed, and we got some interviews with some wonderful guests. But I want to get us back and kind of level set things to where we've been and what we've talked about in the past, and then I've got a surprise for you that you're just not going to believe. So right now, let's talk about how law works in our bicycling ecosystem. This is the Vehicles and Transportation Law. It starts out at the federal level. Who covers bicycles in the federal law? Well, the Department of Transportation, the US DOT, and the CPSC cover this. Those are the guys out there that kind of control what bicycles are, how they're made, how they're safe, and how they're regulated. Once you get past that, we get into state law, which is the state transportation codes. They cover what bicycles can do on the roads. They cover what vehicles can do on the roads. Bicycles are vehicles. They cover what happens there. Now, from that, there even gets a little bit more narrow, which is city codes and municipal codes. They cover what can be used on the parks, on the city streets, and even sidewalks. So let's start back at the top of our pyramid, and we'll go from there. Consumer Product Safety Commission is the United States regulatory authority for developing safety on our products. In the case of bicycles, they have the authority to set and regulate these products, how they're built, how they're made. There's a huge amount of stuff out there, and it all lives in something called 16 CFR. 16 CFR 1512 defines what a bicycle is under the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And in this case, this is really important, so I'm going to slow down. A bicycle means a two-wheeled vehicle having a rear drive wheel that is solely human powered. Now understand that's very important to read this as we read the next part of this. In the next part of this, a 2 or 3-wheeled vehicle with fully operable pedals and an electric motor of less than 750 watts. Now that's real important because there's an and there. So now let's go down to another subpart of this definition, which is what a recumbent bicycle is, and that means a bicycle, which we defined in part A, 1 and 2 up there. So now what did that tell us? Well, it tells us these are not consumer products and not regulated by the CPSC. Human-powered tricycles. It really doesn't matter what configuration they are. Delta, Tadpole, even traditional kids' trikes. Human-powered front-wheel drive bicycles like a cruise bike, not a consumer product. Hand cycles. Configuration doesn't matter. They don't even have pedals. Quadricycles, cargo bikes, unicycles, etc. These things are not covered in this 16 CFR 1512 definition. And that's really important because when we get to the states, a lot of states reference this. So let's go on, though. Let's talk about things like velomobiles, which we know are very important to us. Velomobiles fall into a category of called a one-of-a-kind bicycle because it's uniquely constructed. That's a little bit different, even though they're tricycles and quadricycles, but they fall into this because of this one-of-a-kind nature. When you build them, they're built to spec, they're built custom to people, things like that. Same thing with a custom track bike, other stuff like that. That's really what this was meant to cover. But again, going back, human-powered tricycles. That means your cat trike. That means your TerraTrike. That means all the things that we ride today are not are excluded by this 16 CFR 1512 definition. What did that mean? Wow, look at this. Everywhere you see a red arrow, a box, that's a state that has something stopping you from technically using this vehicle on the road. The yellow ones show where it's limited. We will link to this in the discussions later because it's really important to do this. This is a Google Doc I keep track of. And I'm not a lawyer, so sometimes this stuff is not perfect, but it's the best I could do. I've had a lot of people looking at this, so we think we got it pretty close to right. But when you look at your state in here, if your state has a red box in it somewhere, you're potentially got an excluded vehicle. Now, does that mean you can't ride it on the road? Well, now let's hack to the interviews and let the real experts tell you what's going on. I'm here with Steve Hansen of the Hansen Law Office in Southern California. Steve, can you give us a little background about yourself, your practice, and your bicycling?
Well, I have been an attorney since 1986, passed the California bar, and I have been riding a bike ever since I've been an attorney. And I got into this, quite early, and I have been primarily focused on defending, representing bicycle industry people. So retailers, manufacturers, distributors, people like that. I've also gotten involved in a number of cases with individual cyclists, representing them against government entities. I've been involved in some cases involving, criminal cases against cyclists, stuff like that. That's more rare. It doesn't happen that often. But primarily, I work within the bicycle industry. So I pretty much know 90% of the people in the bicycle industry, all the large players. I've worked with all of them. I do a lot of Consumer Product Safety Commission work from the manufacturer side. So in other words, I get involved in recalls and all the safety stuff.
Where can I find, or where do I know where it's legal to ride my bike on a road, particularly when my bike is non-traditional?
Peopleforbikes.org is actually a pretty nice resource for riders to take a look and see what's going on in their state as far as human-powered bikes and e-bikes. They do a pretty good job. They are the horsepower behind a lot of these state laws, roughly 30 states, in trying to pass e-bike legislation and get model legislation passed. So they're trying to be a user-friendly source in addition to working behind the scenes for the industry. That's where their funding comes from, to get people out on e-bikes and to get them more widely accepted and, out there to be usable and so forth. They do a good job with the on-road segment. And when it comes to off-road, things get a little bit sketchy because it's not completely clear yet what's really going on off-road. But on-road, they're pretty good. And if they don't have something on the website, you can always call them and try to get more specific details. What they will not do is they're not going to get involved in individual problems or projects that you've got in your state unless it's something that's going to represent the broader public. So if you've got a state law problem specifically in your state, they probably already know about it, but it wouldn't hurt to bring it up to them directly and see if they can can move something in your state legislature, since they already have done that in about 30 states.
So, what kind of happens if I'm in a state that has a 3-class system and I ride across the border to a state that doesn't?
Yeah, and it's really funny because they have an overview of electric bike regulations. Looking at it right now, it's got a little map, and everything is green, which means model legislation, except for a couple of states. For example, they've got Oregon in here as an acceptable state. And then they've got problematic states. And they've only got 3 problematic states. One is Massachusetts, of course, a lot of riders there. New Mexico, not a huge riding population. And then Alaska, again, not a huge riding population. But nonetheless, like you said, you cross state lines on a road on your bike, and all of a sudden, now you've got a problem. And I think this is the focus of your broadcast is what happens? What do you need to do if you've got a 3 or 4-wheeled device that's either human powered or electrically powered, or God forbid, gasoline powered? What do you do then if you get pulled over or stopped?
Yeah, I mean, that's where we're going to head to, because a lot of, even some of these states that have the people for bikes have said it's got reasonable legislation. A lot of them don't define human-powered vehicles. They define bicycles as something that's other than human-powered, and so you get something like a hand cycle or another adaptive cycle or something like that out there on the road. What does that mean? I use Texas as an example because we're some of the worst. It defines bicycles as a device that has 2 tandem wheels of 20 inches or larger. There's a lot of things out there on the road that we're pedaling or cranking that are not 2 tandem wheels.
It's sort of like legislation by omission. So if you have a device that's not covered, it's not discussed in in the law, then what? What are you? What governs your usage on the road? This is where you really run into trouble with, police, because police only know certain amounts of the vehicle code in the state. And if they run into something that they don't know, they always have to run back to these fallback provisions that are sort of like, well, you're operating something that isn't legit. You're operating something that isn't defined. You're violating this code section. So therefore, I'm going to just write you under this code section because I don't know, I can't really be sure what it is that you're using or riding. And that's when things start getting messy because, like I said, the police don't know the fine points of the law. They just know the broad strokes, and they'll cite you for, unsafe speed, or we have a basic speed law in California. So if they don't know what they can do, they could just write you for an unsafe speed and say, well, yeah, but I was only going 20. Well, that's an unsafe speed under the conditions or based on what you were using or something like that. So they'll throw these things out, and it's like, well, that's not even a legit, citation. So, but now you have a citation and now you have to fight it. And that's when things get tricky.
The absurdity of this on these wheel definitions is, and 4 wheels comes up a lot in our ecosystem because a lot of quadricycles out there, a lot of cargo cycles, and some adaptive cycles are 4 wheels because of either balance or load issues. Whether or not a bicycle of tandem wheel, training wheels, is a 2-wheeled or 4-wheel vehicle. And because that's the absurdity of this, and the claim is that it's not, that the training wheels make it a 4-wheel vehicle.
You get into a really specific issue like this, and it's going to take, first of all, if someone were to be, so you have 2 issues. One is general question, can I use this training wheel bicycle out on the road, or on the sidewalk or something like that? So that's sort of the general question. You'd have to research that in your specific state, your specific city, your specific county. The other side of that is, okay, now I got cited by the police for a violation of X statute. Okay, so then you'd have to go back and look at that statute that you were cited for, and then try to fight that, particular. So there's two ways to look at it. One is the citation for a specific violation of a specific law. The other is the more general question, is this quote unquote legal to do on this particular roadway, sidewalk, trail, whatever? So all you can do is go on the existing statutes and say, well, this is what they say. And it doesn't really talk about a training wheel. It does talk about four-wheel. And then you come down to statutory construction and all the craziness that involves. A judge, somebody would eventually have to get involved in a situation and say, well, I don't think you violated this. That sort of a thing. So it's very, very tricky stuff. And this is why when you're trying to create a state law, for example, when BPSA or People for Bikes came in and said, let's create this state, let's create this state law involving e-bikes, they were really only concerned with creating an e-bike situation that was going to be safe for class 1, 2, or 3. And if you read the model legislation and some of the stuff behind what BPSA was doing, they basically came right out and said, if you've got a device, if you're a manufacturer and you've got a device and you don't conform to this 20 mile an hour, 750 watt, 1 horsepower situation, if you don't conform to it, we're not going to help you. We're not going to back you. We're not going to help you. You're on your own. If you don't fit within this, you don't fit, it's your problem. And so if you're a purchaser of one of those devices, you're also on your own.
If you're in a class state, a 3-class state, and you've got a motor that's outside of that, it's plated at 1,000 watts, for example, and the 3-class system 750 watt limits, what would happen? How do they know that this thing is there? What would occur if I got stopped or if I was in a vehicular accident?
The 3-class law grew out of, a 3-line definition created in, I think it was 2003. Yes, 2003 is when they changed the definition of bicycle at the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And they said, okay, bicycle now means a 2 or 3-wheeled vehicle with fully operable pedals and an electric motor of less than 750 watts, parens, 1 horsepower, whose maximum speed on a paved level surface when powered solely by such motor, when ridden by an operator who weighs 170 pounds, is less than 20. So they sort of tried to define what 750 watts was with quote unquote 1 horsepower. And then they tried to define what it could do, how much it could push on level ground. Most of the state laws, including California, try to require the manufacturers to label the bike so that it says 750 watts, 20 miles an hour. There's a specific requirement for a labeling. Okay, then you get into the situations where, yes, you have this labeling. It's a class 1, 2, or 3. It's got 750 watts. Now someone has done something. Someone has tweaked something. So now it technically can go over 20. Now it technically has more than 1 horsepower or 750 watts. What do you do then? Well, the Europeans are on this. They already know that modification is happening. California state law, for example, prohibits modification unless you re-sticker. And if you create something out of the 3 classes, you're out. You now have a bike that doesn't comply with California state vehicle code for usage on the roads. And if something were involved in an accident and somebody says, hey, I think this bike was going 40 miles an hour when it ran into this pedestrian, you would be involved in some sort of a forensic situation where they'd have to say, okay, what is this motor doing? Is it a 750 watt motor? Is it a 1 horsepower motor? Can it propel someone more than 20 miles an hour? Wouldn't be too hard to figure that out if, like you said, you get someone that's got a lab, someone that can test something, great. I've asked, unfortunately, I asked about the 750 watts, what that means. Other than the 1 horsepower, which again doesn't help too much, it's not clear what 750 watt means. If that was peak, if that was average, it wasn't clear when CPC wrote the law what they meant. As a result, BPSA, People for Bikes, when they wrote their 3 classes and the state legislation was written, everybody just kept saying 750 watts or 1 horsepower, and they didn't specify how to measure 750 watts. So it's sort of a sore subject that no one wants to really talk about. And that's what happens when you model your state legislation after a federal law that's 3 lines long. What is an insurance policy going to do, right? So the question with the insurance policy is, now you have injured somebody riding an e-bike, and someone's suing you because you injured them. Now the question for the insurance company is, are we going to cover this claim or not? And then it comes down to, what does the policy say? Was this thing that he was riding, is this a thing that we can insure? Is it covered within our policy? Well, we cover anything that's covered by state law, or who knows what the policy says. Then the question becomes, like you said, was it illegally modified by a bike shop or a user? And then if it was, now there's a new problem. If the bike shop did it, now they've got a liability problem. If the user did it, maybe they have a liability problem. Maybe they don't have insurance coverage now for the accident, which actually is a big problem really for the person that's suing, because now there's no insurance covering the suit. So it's just a can of worms there. And just because, let's say you have a bike that you buy at a bike shop and it meets class 1, 2, and 3, and it's got all its, it's 100% legit under state law. It's a totally legit bike, an e-bike, and you injure someone. Okay. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's covered by your insurance policy. Don't think that. Even if you have a bicycle and you're riding a human powered bicycle and you run into someone and they sue you, don't make assumptions about what your insurance policy is going to cover, or, which insurance policy might cover you. Is it going to be an automobile policy that you have, a renter's policy, a homeowner's insurance policy? Don't make assumptions about insurance, because that's a whole other issue. And there are companies that are now trying to sell, quote unquote, e-bike insurance. Okay. And the idea is that they're saying, well, we can sell you this policy that's going to cover theft, and it's going to cover this, and it's going to cover that, and it's going to cover liability, and it's going to, okay. And it's a separate policy. Okay, that's great. But again, there's probably going to be parameters in that policy of things that it's not going to cover. And I would assume one of the things it's not going to cover is something, for example, that wouldn't be legally usable on a state road, or something that was being used in the wrong place at the wrong time, or, he'd have to read the policy. But when you go back and look at what the federal law says about recumbent bicycles, for example, and this is a thing that traps people all the time, it talks about a bicycle. It first defines a bicycle as a 2-wheeled vehicle that's human powered. Then it says the 2- or 3-wheeled vehicle with fully operable pedals and the electric motor. Okay, that's now a bicycle. Okay, but then if you go down and look at recumbent says a recumbent bicycle means a bicycle in which the rider, okay, so the problem is recumbent now means it's either a 2- or a 3-wheeled bicycle, but it's got to be 3-wheeled electric, and then it's recumbent. So for example, a 4-wheeled, if you have a 4-wheeled recumbent device, it's not covered under the CPSC law. And if you have a 3-wheeled human-powered device, it's not covered under the CPSC law. So now you've got a huge gap right there in what the federal law says retailers can even sell that's regulated. Let's say you have a four-wheeled recumbent that's not covered by the Consumer Product Safety Commission under its law. Okay. That doesn't mean that Texas law can't regulate how such non-CPSC regulated devices used. So maybe Texas law would say, okay, a four-wheeled human-powered device can be used on roads. Okay, that's fine. It's just the CPSC doesn't regulate it or talk about it, but Texas says you can use that unregulated thing on our road.
Well, Steve, I appreciate the time you've given us today, and look forward to working with you on a lot of this stuff in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, here we are with Charlie Thomas from Huber Thomas and Marcel. Charlie, can you give us a little background on yourself and your cycling history here?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Doug, thanks for having me on the show. So I will say currently the practice that I have in our firm is probably 90% bike related, all sorts of bike issues. For the most part, it's going to be drivers, presumably those who are texting, just not paying attention and hitting people who are riding on the roadway, and us pursuing claims for them, trying to figure out why the crash happened, what we can do to keep it from happening again, and then trying to get them some sort of justice with insurance compensation for what their losses are. Going back a bit, I started riding very competitively in my early teenage years, and then I went to Texas A&M for their cycling team for college. I was the president of the cycling team when I was there for my senior year. And then I had the choice as to, did I want to try and pursue a pro racing career and try and go to Europe and make it? Or, and by that, I mean, not like in the Tour de France, but probably living in a van or a hostel, entering some of the lower pro races. Or did I want to lay up and go to law school? And I was humbled many times over on the Texas racing scene. So I went to law school, got out, and a lot of my friends just started getting hit. And if you want to call this the 2008 timeframe, call that with the advent of cell phones and texting being used a whole lot more while people are driving. And so, we're looking at it like the roads got much more dangerous. And then we started getting into bike advocacy and trying to do what we could to advocate for vulnerable road user laws or anti-texting laws.
What happens if I get stopped and the law enforcement officer just decides he's going to make an issue of this? What can they do? Can they cite me? Can they take away my bike? What are the options that I would have to deal with as somebody who got stopped in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it depends on what you're getting stopped for. If it's a function of you're just getting stopped because you have too many wheels, I would say cooperate with the officer and then call an attorney right after. You're more than welcome to call me and we'll walk through it together. I'm not going to charge you anything for calling me. I just want to hear what happened and we'll figure something out. But if it's for something other than having the wrong number of wheels under the law, let's talk about this for a second. In some states, it is not illegal to drink or have somewhere over the amount of alcohol in your system where you'd otherwise get a DUI in a motor vehicle. It wouldn't be illegal to have that and ride a human-powered bike. In other states, you can get a DUI while riding a bicycle. So I think depending on the nature of why you'd be getting pulled over, did you run a stop sign? Are you riding without lights at nights? Or are you veering through traffic because you're intoxicated? Kind of depending on the nature of that might lead to what police might do with your bike. Are they going to impound it and take you to jail? Or is it just, writing you a ticket? I would think it would have to be a pretty severe offense for them to want to take your vehicle and impound it.
How would they know if I have a 1500 watt motor or not? What does that mean? And how would they know if if I was doing 25 versus 20? I mean,
I have not seen any form of sophisticated testing of the wattage or power of an e-bike by law enforcement. So if somebody has tuned their class 3 e-bike up, maybe if they're going 50 miles an hour flying down the street, that could turn ahead and get some attention from law enforcement. But at this point, I mean, I think I think the standard. I'm more familiar with Mississippi and Louisiana and Texas, but when you have the 3-class tier of e-bike and the max that you can have is 750 watts, I don't think anybody's really paying any attention to that, Doug, unless you're just going to blatantly flaunt the rules and you're on you're traveling at a very high rate of speed on what looks like a bicycle with pedals.
We've got a municipality around here, though, that's kind of interesting. You probably know who I'm talking about, who's got a no motorized vehicles on their trail that they have. And they have claimed that includes e-bikes. So there's a question of whether that's possible or not. And then the second question is, if I'm on their trail and I'm operating my e-bike and I shut the motor off or I take the battery out, am I still got an e-bike, or what does that mean?
That is a great question. I'll answer it this way. So first of all, the best lawyerly answer that I can give you is it depends. What I think it depends on is how is the actual prohibition worded. And if it's called, you can't use a bike under motor power. Well, if you've got an e-bike and you're not using it under motor power and you've shut the battery off, I think that's totally fine. It sounds very burdensome because I know most of the e-bikes that I've ridden are considerably heavier than a regular bike. And so riding one of those around without the battery power will be a lot more of a workout than just riding a regular bike. But at the same time, let's say a prohibition is worded as just saying you can't have any sort of bike that has a motor on it. Well, even if you take the battery off, technically it still has a motor on it. I doubt you'd get in much trouble if you're riding it around, like a regular bike, possibly even slower than a regular bike, and the battery's off of it. But I think that just goes to show that e-bikes are becoming that much more prevalent to where people who are running trails are saying these are now banned. And I think it's a shame that they would have to do kind of a wholesale ban of e-bikes on a trail like that. I know that there are some off-road kind of downhill looking full suspension mountain bikes that are e-bikes that I want to say cost more than regular like motocross, like full gas powered Honda, Yamaha motocross bikes. And I'm sure, we could get on one of those and tear up a trail and just terrorize everybody on it. At the same time, you might have somebody who's getting up there in age who's just trying to make it down the trail, not going any faster than anybody else. And this ban would apply to them on an e-bike too. So I don't really like that, but I understand that it's sometimes tough just to contain the bad activity and to regulate against that without a wholesale ban on the underlying reason for why somebody's able to go 30 miles an hour up a hill, no problem. But I would say that to answer your question, look at the actual verbiage of the prohibition and see if you could make your bike conform to that. And again, if somebody has a big issue with this, give us a call. I mean, I think a reason that there are lawyers and not just a default, you feed the facts into the machine, it applies the law and spits out a ticket as to are you in the wrong or not, is because there are shades of gray in so much of this. And so while a spirit of the law infraction might not violate the letter of the law, or it might, or vice versa, there are all sorts of different ways to explain it and look at the bigger context of things versus just applying it at face value and getting the wrong result.
Any final words you got for our audience?
My wife and I have 2 little girls who are little riders themselves. They're 6 and 8. And so it's very easy for me to go to work every day and think, I just want to make the world safer for Colette and Margot and all their friends and anybody else who wants to come behind them. So if anybody has questions or specific issues, feel free to reach out to me. You can go to our bikelaw.com website and click on Texas or Louisiana or Mississippi, and you'll find me. My email address is charlie with an IE at bikelaw.com. So feel free to reach out that way too.
I'm here with Steve Magas, Ohio's bicycle attorney. Is it bicycle lawyer, bicycle attorney?
Whatever, a bike lawyer, ohiobikelawyer.com. How about that? We'll get a plug.
ohiobikelawyer.com. And Steve's been on the show before. We've talked about a lot of things. Ohio's got a pretty good code. But what if the state doesn't define bicycles, or it uses the older 2-tandem wheel definition from the 1940s? Does it mean I can't ride my trike?
I think it means you are at risk if some jurisdiction doesn't like the fact that these trikes are now coming in and taking up road space and slowing everybody down, and they're looking for a way to get you off the road. Some smart police officer might read the statute and say, here's an angle we can try. You're not allowed to ride that, and then they give you a ticket. It's one of those things where you can ride it until they tell you you can't, I guess. But the better approach, rather than trying to get tickets, is to examine the law, get with your state advocacy organization, and work to improve, the law. If there's a problem, maybe you ride it, nobody ever stops you, nobody cares. This became an issue in Ohio because we had a guy who was very technical on the board. And oddly enough, literally within a year after we changed that law, he was rear-ended and suffered injuries, and he called me from the scene. And had we not changed that law, the lawyer who got the other side of that case would have definitely been the type who would have figured out that, he doesn't meet the statute. So, it was the timing on that was good. So the risk you run is twofold. Number one, maybe you get a ticket, but number two, if you get hit by somebody and you want to present a claim for injuries, or there's a wrongful death claim because somebody got killed on this thing, and that thing that they were riding doesn't meet the statutory definition, it may give a sharp insurance lawyer some argument to say, hey, you know what? We're not paying you. Too bad for your fractured ribs and your head injury and your broken leg. We don't owe you any money because you shouldn't have been out there on that thing. That's a risk as much as getting a ticket or being kicked off the road.
What do I do if I'm in a collision with my bicycle? Either I've had an impact or somebody's impacted me. What steps do I do, particularly if I'm on these edge cases?
So let's assume for a minute that there is a crash, your bike is damaged, you've been hurt, and for now, let's just say that the other guy was totally responsible. There's no argument that you did anything wrong. You then, in just about every state, I believe, you have a claim against that person, which would be covered by that other person's automobile insurance. So your medical bills and your property damage, pain and suffering, all of that would be paid by this other person's insurance. Now, some states have a different type of coverage, no fault coverage, and that changes how the claim is presented. That changes what types of claims can be presented. That changes how much you might get. Ohio doesn't have that. If you get hit in downtown Cincinnati, you don't have that. If you get hit on the bridge going into Kentucky, technically Kentucky owns the river and they own the bridge, and the law has changed, and now you're in a no-fault state. So it's an entirely different animal at that point. You do the same things to protect yourself, though. And I've written about this, and I've also have a little 4x6 card that gives you the top 10 things to do if you're in a crash, assuming you can think about it at that point in time. Number one, make sure you get the police there. Make sure you get an ambulance there. Don't try to be the hero and walk away with your arm dangling and your leg wobbly and your head, unclear. So you want to protect yourself at the scene. You want to protect your bike at the scene. You don't want to let people move stuff around, change everything. Don't, try to keep the car and the bike in the same place until the police get there. Make sure the police document it. Make sure your story of the case and what happened goes to the officer. Make sure witnesses are cataloged at the scene. If you're able to take pictures at the scene and videos on your phone, do it. And you cannot have too many pictures of the scene, your bike, the car, the other guy's driver's license, the other guy's license plate, your injuries, your wounds, your bleeding, whatever. You want to get as much as you can get or have somebody else take them for you, pictures, video, so that 3 days, 3 months, a year and a half later, we can go back and really see, what happened there. Get yourself treated. Get to the hospital. You have to have this paper trail of things. If you're going to make a claim against somebody, you have to have this paper trail of a police report, police photos, witness statements, your photos, going to the doctor, going to the hospital, going to your primary care, going to wherever they send you, doing the physical therapy, whatever it is that you have to do. We have to have a paper trail of that, or else it almost doesn't count in the eyes of the insurance company when we go to present that claim to the other driver. This all assumes the other driver, A, sticks around, B, tells the truth, and C, has insurance, and D, was at fault entirely. If any of those things change, then it becomes more complicated and a little more complex. Hopefully, you have homeowners insurance. If you have homeowners insurance, that insurance provides a defense to you in the event that you are on your bike and you are accused of negligently causing some damage or hurting someone else. If you run over a kid in a crosswalk, or you are on the bike path and you go left of center and hit somebody, those people can turn around and have a claim against you, and those are covered under your homeowner's policy. So
what if you don't have a motor vehicle?
If you don't have
like our friend Nina on the show here she's car free. How does she get an insured motorist?
You don't, unless you have purchased. There are a few companies that write what's called bicycle insurance. It's called
Merkel
and Velo insurance. They write a sort of a substitute for uninsured motorist coverage. The problem is, the last time I checked and talked with those folks, they maxed out at like 25,000. So
yeah, it's real small.
It's small. It's not real expensive, but you don't get a lot of coverage. But it gives you something. If you don't have a car, again, I don't know if Velo offers MedPay. I think they do medical payments coverage, and you pay another little extra premium to get that. And if nothing else, it gives you some money to cover your out-of-pocket expenses that come up. If you don't have health insurance, at least it gives you some money to pay for medical bills. And if you do have health insurance, but you have a deductible, all of a sudden you have this cash flow issue where, you may have a claim at some point that might get paid, but it may take 3 years to get paid. And your hospital wants, your $5,000 copay right now. So you might be able to tap into a medical payments coverage for that on your auto or your bike insurance.
Well, Steve, as always, thank you for joining us. We'll link your information at the bottom as always. And of course, how to get your cards, because that's something that everybody should carry with them. And certainly, if they get a chance, read some of your articles, because I've always found them interesting. Any last words?
Well, you can always go to OhioBikeLawyer.com. You can reach me, bikelawyer@me.com. If you send me a note with your name and address and how many you want, I'll send out a dozen or a couple hundred or 1,000 for a ride, whatever. I mean, we've drop shipped up to 2,500, I think, for a big event in the past. So whatever, we just want to get the information out to people, and we're happy to do that. So, but I'm always happy to talk bikes. So anytime anybody wants to call or write, I generally get them a pretty quick response from me.
That's great. Thanks again, Steve.
Thank you. There's no, horsepower motor in it, and
okay, I'm going to jump right in here, because that you just triggered Doug, Steve. You will be here for 3 hours if you start going into Doug's getting stopped by police. Because
I think we spent 3 hours on that in one of these shows.
We just did another, Steve. We just did another cross country. Actually, did 2 cross countries, and I've got lots of police stories to tell.
Oh boy!
But we usually invite them. Usually invite them to come in and take a whiff. And that will,
doesn't pass the smell test. That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So we are back with Doug Davis now. And first of all, I want to really sincerely thank Steve, Charlie, and Steve for helping us out on the interviews there with this very complicated and difficult issue. Steve Hansen, actually, I see, is on the live chat. So if you have questions about this and want to ask an expert, he's there on the live chat. So avail yourself of that. Now, Doug is, as you can all tell, very passionate about these issues. He has recently uploaded a series of pages on his website, on the Bicycle Evolution website, which we will link to, that has all kinds of great information for you about this. And so, Doug, we're going to, I think, summarize that right now and then talk about what people can do if they want to get involved as well. So let's start out, Doug, if we could. So what is the real liability for bent riders on the road if your bike or trike turns out to be undefined, as you described before?
Well, so when they're undefined, it's not really undefined. That's really not the right term. It's unregulated. So and that's a big difference here, because the bicycles under the CPSC code have a huge set of documents that describe how they're manufactured, how to make them safe, how even the assembly, bolts that you use, how they're welded, stopping distance. That's all in there. Something that's not a bicycle under this definition is not going to be regulated by that. And that's really kind of interesting, because what happens when the bicycle's not constructed properly? Or what happens when there's an accident and somebody wants to go back and say, wait a minute, that chain ring was way out front, there's a problem. So this is where things get to be, ambiguous. And what that means is it's expensive on the rider or the person that was involved in it, because you get into this judicial construction mechanism where somewhere, some way down the line, a judge is going to have to make a decision of whether or not what this thing was it a bicycle or not, because it didn't specifically fit inside that rule.
Right.
And that even gets into the states, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Right. All right. So let's talk about what legal perils there actually are for, say, bike shops and manufacturers if these are undefined.
Well, and so that's an area we don't know all the answers to, actually. So because they're not regulated in this definition for bicycles, they're regulated somewhere, probably over to the Department of Transportation, over to the NTSB or something like that. We just don't know. And quite honestly, I don't think they know either. I've had some conversations with people and they're like, wait a minute, that's CPSC. I said, no, it's not there, because this has been excluded out. And so there's a whole, I don't know, we'd call it turmoil, but there's certainly some consternation right now of people trying to figure out where these things would go to answer that question. So we're kind of asking the question in advance of something happening out there that became a judicial problem. And that's really setting up a lot of this stuff ahead of time to go through and get this clarified. And so when it comes to a bike shop, well, a bike shop would normally have general liability for what they did, and the manufacturer would have liability for what they did. Now, since there's no definition, or they're excluded from the definition of how to construct these things, that's an interesting area that would be, it's ambiguous. And that also can kind of explain why some of the trikes and other things we get are not necessarily as well made as they should perhaps be. I'm not talking about for the major brands, but we've certainly seen plenty of things coming through the online ecosystem, the direct to consumer, where they're flimsy, the welds aren't very good, their stopping distances are way below what anything reasonable would be. And we've even interviewed somebody on the show with one like that, where it's that, that area of, I don't have to adhere to something that's non-regulated. Not all consumer products are regulated. When they fall out of the regulation, that's a free-for-all.
Okay. Now, Steve Hansen talked a bit about insurance, and we have a really good question here also from Asta. If a non-U.S. resident plans on visiting and biking in the U.S., which sort of short-term policies are worth getting? Special rules that might apply to non-residents? We need to know about residents and non-residents. Steve talked a little bit about it. And also we referenced Nina because what about if you don't even have a car and you wanted one of the pieces of advice was to use your non-insured motorist from your car insurance. So let's get into the insurance aspect. What's your recommendations there?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question, and I'm going to give you an opinion. I really haven't researched this, but I want to kind of walk it backwards and get you to where my thoughts are on this. First of all, when you're involved in an accident, and let's say it's not your fault, hopefully, then the other guy's insurance, it typically has the liability and should be taking care of it. When you don't have insurance, then, or the person flees, which is, unfortunately fairly typical in an automotive bicycle collision, the person runs off, then your uninsured motorist insurance kicks in off of your automotive policy. If you don't have that, you don't really have coverage in a situation of an uninsured motorist unless you have specific insurance for that landed into some part of your homeowner's policy, or like we talked about earlier, you have one of the specific bicycle insurances from Markle or Velo Assurance, or a couple of the folks that are selling that out there. So there's a lot of kind of things in there. The only person that can answer that is the people that wrote your policy. So you got to dig in and read your policy, find somebody that can read it and understand it. There's a lot of gaps in these things. They're not, particularly in these edge conditions. What we typically recommend is whatever uninsured motorist you've got, you max it out, because we mentioned earlier, like the Velo insurance is it's $25,000. If you're laying on the side of the road bleeding, and your choices are a hospital ride in the ambulance or a hospital ride in the helicopter, well, I think I'd pretty much choose the helicopter. Well, your 20 grand went right then. So it's gone. And now you're on your own for everything else, or you're into your health insurance and its deductibles or things like that. So, max that out. Look at your policy on this. Now, look at your policy on what it will cover. Talk to your homeowner's insurance. We're running into things now where people have had issues with their bikes. They've had either collisions or they've had weather damage, and the bikes aren't covered. It's a really big issue in e-bike space, not only velomobiles and trikes, but just general e-bikes on what's covered there, because a lot of the policies have managed to write themselves out with the e-bikes not being covered under homeowners. Lastly, the question about somebody traveling into the country, there's all sorts of traveler insurance policies out there being sold at different levels, both online. What you need to go to that and find one that specifically covers that and ask the question. The best defense you've got for fighting an insurance company that backs out of some liability is having a written conversation with their agent, with your question and their answer. So you need to say, I'm going to travel in the US. I'm going to ride my bike from point A to point B over this period of time. What's the policy for me? And they're going to sell you. There's their sales. But then if you have an issue, God forbid, and you're in a judicial situation and they say, no, you're not covered, you can say, look, I had this conversation. Your guy sold me this. So now you've got some defensive ability in this claim.
All right. And Nina, how about getting you up here? Larry, can you bring Nina up? And maybe you can tell us about your experience, because this is it's not the first time you heard about this business about insurance. If you are carless, like as you are, if you wouldn't mind, tell us what your experience has been with insurance.
Well, when I got my Velomobile, I insured it a year at a time through Velo Assurance. It was pretty expensive. I fortunately didn't have to use it. I let it expire. And then when people in my town were losing their minds, it occurred to me that if I left my Velomobile outside, it might be targeted for vandalism. So I got Velo Assurance again. And fortunately, didn't use it, and that's it. That's been the extent of my bike insurance. I guess I am, flying without a parachute.
Right. Well, I mean,
high risk Nina there.
That's right. I mean, we all take risks. So
we all take it. It's funny how much is bound up with cars. It's like an aspect of car culture that I don't think about much. You're just supposed to have these policies with your car. Velo Assurance is not really cheap.
No. Not with Velomobiles, because they go off the net present market value of the bike. So a Velomobile on Velo Insurance is very expensive.
Yeah, and then it would be better if I had some policy that just covered me on any bike, right? Like I could have insurance for the Velomobile, but what if I'm on a different bike?
Yeah, rider insurance. It would be. I think there's a point in here where there needs to be an uninsured motorist policy for non-motorists. So that's the key there, but it doesn't really exist that I could tell.
Yeah. So I'm just living life on the edge, high risk. That's me. Everybody who knows me knows that I
doing it one day at a time.
Yeah,
risking
baiting death. Yes.
All right, Nina, thank you so much for sharing that with us. All right, guys. So we're going to finish this really important segment up with the question of what do we do? So we've established the issues here, and Doug is going to talk to us a little bit about how we can get involved and talk a little bit about what he has done so far. So, Doug, tell us, how can our viewers get involved with this?
Sure. So we have one problem and many problems. The one problem is kind of the CPSC that we've talked about a lot. That 16 CFR 1512 definition, it needs to be updated. The only way to get that really updated is to get your congressman or some congressman introduce a bill to modify it. So on the website we'll link to, there's some model code that's been used in the States. We've modified it to match the CPSC kind of language. That's kind of what we're shooting for. I'm not a lawyer. Guys, help the website. None of us are really lawyers. We're bike people and engineers and other kinds of nerds. And so we've done the best we can. But something like that. So go to the website, find that link, look at on there. There's a way to contact your congressperson. Click that and say, hey, this is a problem. Watch this show. They can point back to the show here. Read this website, because I've got all this data on the website now of all this stuff. Look at the white paper that's out there. Look at the spreadsheet that tracks all the states. Now you see the problem. Explain to me how, what I need to do to help you introduce a bill. Once we can get some bill and get some traction and get some sponsorship on the bill, we can walk through that 16 CFR 1512 and get this definition cleaned up so it matches the modern ecosystem. That's the first step. A lot of the states are pretty good. Only 4 or 5 though are really good. The rest of them all have some kind of hair in them where they kind of messed around with old definitions and trying to get things kind of stuck under the tent. There's model legislation in several states that I've published out there. Those are really good definitions. They cover everything we do in our cycling ecosystem. That's what we need to the rest of the states to follow. So when you look at your state on the chart and it's got a red box on it or a yellow box, you can read the details on why those colors there, and then you can go to the same website. There's a contact your local representative. Click that, put in your zip code, and it'll tell you who you need to talk to. All these states need to get this legislation put through of some or similar. Now, that said, that's another big bunch of work. All of this I can work on, as Gary knows, because we've been living with each other on this thing for years. This has been a pet project of mine, which is now finally coming to head because I've got all the data. I have calls, I have emails, I have stuff going on all the time about this now, but I need your help. I need, as Steve said a minute ago, that People for Bikes is the kind of the engine that runs all of this stuff. They're a great advocacy group, but they only work on things people start asking them to work on. So you, our viewership, the people that watch this later, contact your legislator, contact your congressman, contact your local representative, contact the advocacy groups like People for Bikes, point them at our stuff. My contact information is all over this stuff. I mean, everybody knows how to get hold of me. I'm not hard, other than when I'm out riding my bike. And then the data is there, though. It's condensed down to where almost anybody can understand it. And if you don't understand it, a local bike lawyer or a local bike advocacy group is the other person to get involved in this.
Okay, and we are going to, of course, point to the website, Doug, and put those pages together that you've put together for people that are a great resource. And I hope that this video will be a great resource as well. Any final words on this subject before we leave it?
The final words. This is not meant to stir up fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So it wasn't. This is not a FUD piece. This is we've all been riding trikes for years and recumbent bikes for years. I mean, front wheel drive recumbent bike. I first rode one of those in the 80s. These are not things. Nobody's going to go out specifically targeting your cat trike in your rider. None of that's going to happen. We've all kind of been in the spirit of the law, and we all conform to the spirit of the law. Nobody meant, oh my God, we excluded, a human-powered trike in the in 16 Nobody meant to do that. And judges and juries and things like that, there's a whole justice system that's really good here in the U.S. for the most part, and a lot of common sense gets applied. So this isn't to say, don't stop riding your bike, don't do this. It says what we need to do is protect our environment, protect our people, protect our other riders, and get all this stuff sorted out. And now's the time to do it. We've got a big push for adaptive cycling. You got a big push for alternative transportation, all those things there. So we've got momentum in the ecosystem. Now we got to get action and get ourselves out on the table so we can say this needs to get fixed too, guys, to make this world useful for us.
Great. And I think we've got a huge recumbent hero in you, Doug. So we really appreciate all of what you do to spread the word, the communication aspect of it, and also the hard work that a lot of people don't see, the advocacy that you do. So we really appreciate all that you do and helping me put this segment together as well. So thanks, Doug. We will talk again later. It's been fun. And we'll be moving along then. So thanks. All right, guys, let's get into the next segment, talking about buying and selling a used Bent. We talked to a couple of interesting folks that I think have some good advice for you on this, starting out with Chris Ferguson. I call him Ferg. He is a friend, and he owns or actually administers the Facebook Recumbent Trikes and Bike Classified. So, Larry, let's hear what Ferg had to say. All right, guys, we are here with my pal Ferg, Chris Ferguson, who is in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he has some expertise in this buying and selling of used recumbents, and I thought we would chat with him for a couple of minutes and see if we can't pick his brains on this to help us all out. So, Ferg, welcome to the Laidback Bike Report.
Thanks for having me, Gary. I don't know about expertise. Let's go with amateur expert.
All right. Well, I trust what you have to say. Let's get into it. So, Ferg, you have or administer a group on Facebook. Tell us what it's about.
I Recumbent Trike and Bike Classifieds. I volunteered to help out the original administrator maybe a year and a half ago, and then he disappeared. So it became my group. So I changed it from public to private. I added some rules, cleaned it up, and I think we got a pretty good page. People can buy and sell recumbent bike, trikes, accessories, helmets, whatnot, anything related to recumbents. I guess if you're a public group, anybody can post onto your group. Anybody from the outside, anybody unaffiliated, you get a lot of spam, you get a lot of BS. When we went to private, it knocked all that out. Any post has to be approved by the administrator, which is me. Basically, it has to be related to recumbents, whether it's the actual product, whether it's an accessory for a bike, helmets, anything that a rider could use. The basic rules, be considerate to everybody else, keep negative thoughts to yourself. I set up a rule of 2 months for a product to stay on the site. If it doesn't sell in that time period, the person can actually repost it if they need to. I hope that people, when they sell, take them down.
All right, Ferg, let's tap into what you have learned about the current market a little bit and share that with our viewers. So if you could tell us, first of all, what types of bikes and trikes, what sorts of recumbents are being bought and sold right now?
A little bit of everything. Trikes are pretty hot right now. I see a lot of Sun or bikes. I'm seeing a lot of classics. Recently had a Elusive Horizon that I had on there for sale. I saw a Turner on there recently, which is pretty classic. Yeah, there's a big variety on there. Every day somebody's adding new products.
How long typically does it take to sell? And would you say prices for used recumbents are up or down versus, I don't know, a year or two ago, something like that?
Well, I do some flipping on the side of my own. I have put a bike on and had it sell in an hour. Then again, I had the Halusic, which I had on there for 3 weeks last time. Then I took it off and I just put it back up, and it sold in 3 or 4 days. So there's really no determination of time. When it comes to prices, I have known prices I've noticed they've been going up, especially in the last year, mainly due to demand and the fact that buying new is really hard right now.
For someone who wishes to buy online, what advice do you have for them to, what should they be looking for? What should they be watching out for?
Me personally, when I buy, I like to go look, check everything out, make sure it's mechanically sound, make sure if it does need work, it's something that I can do. If you're looking to buy, a lot of people don't know what they want. Do I want a long wheelbase, short wheelbase? Do I want a trike? Do I want a tadpole trike? Do I want a delta? There's so many things out there. My best advice, especially when I started actually buying for myself, is go out and try them. I went out, I tried a few, didn't like the seat or didn't like this or that about it. Figured out what I liked and stuck with it. And now I have 4 bikes and a trike.
Now, how about if you are selling your recumbent?
I've bought a few that they just wanted to get rid of. They had an inch of dust on them. They were dirty. Looking at the pictures, you couldn't even tell if the paint was good. If you really want to sell a bike, just do a little cleanup on it. If it's greasy, clean up the grease. If it's covered in dust, just run a rag over it. Clean it up a little bit. Touch it up. If the brakes are rubbing or squealing or something like that, do what you can. If you can't do that, mention it to the seller or to the buyer. I'm sorry. Say, hey, it's got some brake issues. I don't know how to deal with it. But make it presentable. I've seen some bikes, people are asking top dollar for this bike, and it looks like they just dug it out of the garbage.
What would your advice be in terms of pricing your used recumbent?
I usually try to stay within a range. I do a lot of research on other sites, private sites, individuals selling, companies selling, to see what the used market is on that particular bike at the time. If there's a lot of them out there, you can expect you're not going to be able to get top dollar, obviously, because there's so much competition. If it's something unique, you can probably get a little better. Just do your research, find a price range that's fair for everybody, and try to stay within that. Don't necessarily have to get top dollar, but if you're fair, I've found the more fair I am, where I'm actually still making a little bit of profit, and the people are getting a good product and good bike out of it, everybody wins.
Well, Ferg, thank you so much for sharing that. Did you have any final thoughts?
If you'd like to join the Facebook group, there's a few easy questions. Do you understand this is about recumbents only? I will follow the rules. And why do you want to join? There's other groups out there that are awesome too. We're not in any kind of competition at all. We're helping everybody get their product out there. The more places that you post, the better chance you have.
I wore my Bent shirt for you.
Very nice. Well, we shouldn't have had that camera pointed up so high.
Yeah.
All right, Ferg. Appreciate your time and your advice as always, and we'll be in touch. So you take care now.
All right. Take care, Gary.
All right. As Ferg said, as many places as you can advertise, that will make it more likely that you'll get more buyers or sellers, depending on what you're doing. So let's take a look at another Facebook group. This is, in fact, the largest group on Facebook for buying and selling recumbents, Steve Wood and Recumbent Classifieds. Well, I am here with Steve Wood from the Facebook group Recumbent Classified. Hi, Steve. How's it going?
Hi, Gary. Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine. Well, I wanted to add your voice into this session about buying and selling used recumbents. And being a moderator of this Facebook group, I know you're very well acquainted with all this. So why don't we kick it off by having you tell us a little bit about Recumbent Classified on Facebook?
Sure. Recumbent Classifieds was started several years ago by Nanda Holtz, he a few years ago he reached out. The traffic was starting to pick up pretty good, and he asked for a little bit of help as far as moderating the group. So myself and Suzanne Teixeira have joined in as moderators, and the three of us try to ride herd on the group. I guess with the exception of BentRider's classified section, I think this is probably one of the longest running recumbent specific used groups out there.
Okay, it's a really large group. But what, you have like 11,000 members in the group?
Yeah, as of this morning, a little over 11,800. So at their current growth rates, I wouldn't be surprised by the first of next year, early in January, we'll probably cross 12,000 members.
Great. Okay. Why don't you tell us a little about how one goes about buying or selling something on your Facebook group?
Sure. Well, it's a sort of an extension of, or integrated into the Facebook Marketplace system. So once you become a member of the group, then you can post to it. We've always had vetting questions in the group, so that to try and keep down the amount of scammers and spammers, if you will. So recently we've gone to turn the group into a private group. You can still find the group online, but in order to post or to interact, you have to become a member. And that requires answering a couple of questions before you're accepted.
And why don't you hit the top rules, maybe, that folks should know about the do's and don'ts of the recumbent classified group?
Sure. Essentially, what we're looking for, the number one rule is for recumbents and related accessories. And that can be recumbent bikes, recumbent trikes, and components that are usable both can be for recumbents or for other devices. It's for sale post or want to buy. It's for pre-owned bikes and trikes and accessories. Dealers can post used or consignment bikes, but it's not a place for dealers and brokers or resellers for selling new stock or promoting their business. We do allow some, like a few flag makers, T-shirts, and those sorts of things on a limited basis. We ask people to be polite, and sometimes there's an issue in buy-sell groups is someone doesn't agree with a price that someone's posted, and we just tell them, if you don't like what you see, go to the next one. And also, if the items are sold, we also ask our people to mark the item as sold. We will typically leave a sold item up because it's a way for people they can search the group and kind of look at price history for particular models of trikes. And finally, we ask if someone has an issue, they reach out to one of the admins. In addition, the key tips I want to give folks is, if you're going to join the group, make sure you answer the questions, the vetting questions. If you don't answer the questions, we won't let you in the group. That's just the bottom line. Just understand for people that are posting a lot of sales stuff on Facebook Marketplace, understand how that system works and post it to groups that are specific to what you're trying to sell.
So as someone who very clearly has their finger on the pulse of the buying and selling of recumbents these days, I wanted to ask you, what's hot? What do you see a lot of being bought and sold right now?
Trikes are ruling pretty much. Trike posts typically constitute probably more than 75% of the products of the bikes that are posted. We do still see a few two-wheeled recumbents out there, but it's predominantly trikes these days. The lower the price, it seems like the easier it is to get something sold. High ticket items like velomobiles, that's hard. Sometimes it's a slow sell. I mean, I've got 2 velomobiles up on there. They've been up on the site since April.
What have you noticed with pricing in general? Again, in mostly trikes, I guess, but whatever you see, are prices down, up, about the same? What do you see over the last couple of years, say?
I would say that over the last couple of years that prices that have firmed up a little bit and tive come up just a bit, particularly in trikes. I've seen a few really high priced trikes that have popped up over the last few months. Usually they're full suspended, maybe e-assist models that carry pretty good price tag. But low end trikes, maybe a little bit of a creep up on the pricing, but it's not uncommon to see entry level trikes in the $600 to $900 price point, which may not be a lot below what they may have sold for originally.
What's your best advice? What are best practices, would you say, for someone buying and for someone selling a recumbent bike?
Well, for the seller, making sure you have an ad that's well written, describes the bike, has photos that show the general stuff of the bike, and if there are condition issues that you might have that might concern a buyer, like paint dings or those sorts of things, and make sure that you're giving enough information to the buyer that they can make a bit of an informed decision about it. History on the bike, mileage is really kind of a subjective thing. It's better to give a good description of issues related to wear, like tire conditions. Have you replaced components and that sort of thing. For buyers, I say, just like anything that you're buying, where you're not doing a face-to-face transaction, buyer beware. Make sure that you understand, number one, what you're buying. Have enough of a discussion with the seller that you feel comfortable with dealing with them. If you can use a payment system that gives you some protection, PayPal or something like that.
All right. Well, Steve, I want to thank you so much for sharing your vast knowledge in this area. Folks, you may remember that Steve was on the Laidback Bike Report a while back talking about his and Suzanne's San Antonio bike tours, which they run as well. And I hope everything's going well with that. So if you guys are interested in a bike tour in San Antonio on recumbent trikes, boy, that is the place to check out. Make sure you do that. So any final words, Steve?
Well, like I say, come on and, if you're looking for used bikes and trikes, Recumbent Classifieds on Facebook, join our group. We'll be happy to have you. And it's a good way to, if nothing else, you can look at the what's out there and get an idea of what used prices are like these days. Great. And come on down to San Antonio, tour with us.
All right, that sounds great. Thanks a lot, Steve Wood.
Thanks, Gary. Y'all have a great one.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And of course, I don't think there's a place that has been around longer to buy and sell recumbents than BentRider Online. And with us right now, of course, Larry Varney. And Larry, if we could, let's start out with what it takes to buy and sell on BentRider Online these days. I know there's that you guys instituted a fee earlier. Tell me what it takes and how you go about buying and selling on BentRider.
Well, it's not so much fee related strictly to buying and selling. Well, buying, for instance, you pay no fee at all. But for the selling, you had to be, quote, a paying member of BentRider, which means you can't be just a registered user. You have to look at the various levels of membership and what you're entitled to, such things as how many photographs to how large. Basically, if you want to go in and pay for like a $20 a year membership or something, then you can go ahead and sell bikes and trikes. Now, one thing too, the selling of accessories, you don't have to be such a member, but most people are. I mean, if somebody's going to be selling accessories, chances are at some point they'll probably want to sell a bike or a trike. So that's the only thing. You have to be one of the quote paying members of BentRider Online and able to sell a bike or a trike.
Okay. And, a question popped up here, a good one from Emerson. What about trades? Not everyone has the cash. So I really didn't ask that question of the Facebook groups. You can do that on BentRider, can't you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's up to you and the seller. If you got something they might want, go ahead. It's we don't have any rules against that. So, you still need, if you've got something for sale, you still need to be a, paying member and able to quote, post something for sale. Now, afterwards, if you decide you're going to trade it to somebody, fine, you can do it. But if you post something for sale or trade, if it's a bike or a trike, you need to be a paying member.
All right. And I think we'll finish up with some advice from you, Larry, that I asked the other guys. What is your best advice for if you want to buy a Bent on BentRider, and if you want to sell? Give us your best advice.
Well, I was listening to the other guys, of course, and nodding my head, thinking, "Oh yeah, that's good advice," and I pretty much agreed with everything they said. We don't have on BentRider Online the same degree of you don't have to pass certain regulations and rules and all that other than be a paying member. But as I would advise people, if they're going to buy something, to hopefully you'll get some sort of a photograph or a series of photographs from the seller that indicates that yes, this really is something they have in their possession. I'm always a little bit leery if I see somebody posting what is obvious photographs from the manufacturer. It's like, wait a minute, if you can't take a picture of your own bike or trike, I'm not so sure I want to spend money on it. Ask them about serial numbers and stuff like that. And simple things that indicate that, yes, they really do have this thing, what tire size, can you take a picture of such and such, like the chain rings or something, or the cogs, something that would indicate, hey, they really do have this. So, because often, somebody's a long way away and you really can't go out there and see it in person. If you could, great. I always advise people, whether they're buying something new or used, at least sit on it, because not every seat fits everybody. But if you can't do that, then yeah, you're going to have to, deal with something that you can't actually get your seat on. But yeah, look into the various things that would indicate that, yes, this person really does have this, and they can provide that information. That to me is the best idea for buying something. For selling something, I would say when it comes to when you want to sell it, sometimes you don't have any options. But if you do, try to sell it when the weather's turning nice. Like if it's becoming spring and people are thinking about getting out and riding again, because who wants to go out and ride when it's cold? That's when you're going to get the better prices. So try to sell something when people are going to be more eager to buy something. If it's in the fall and the winter, a lot of people are thinking, well, why do I keep this thing around? I'm going to go ahead and sell it because I'm not going to ride it for the next couple of months. So timing is a good idea. If you haven't got the option to wait, then you have to think, well, maybe if I knock a few $100 or $1,000 off of this thing, I can sell it better. That's what I would do. Some people have asked me similar questions before, and a lot of times it's, what season is it? Because if it's in the northern hemisphere, it's not going to be a good selling season if it's cold and snowy and wet. So.
Absolutely. And then, of course, if you want to ship it to the Southern Hemisphere, that's going to cost you a lot of money.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That makes sense. All right, good. Thank you, Larry. And Larry, if you could bring Denny and Doug up quickly, we're going to ask their advice, or I think they've got something to contribute. Denny, you have a story to tell us quickly?
Just a general experience. I said probably 10, 20 bikes over the years. A couple of interesting places. I've sold at least 3 at flea markets, at the electronic flea markets, ham radio flea markets. I've sold at least 3 because you tend to find people that are more open-minded and looking for something like that. I've also bought on Craigslist probably 5 or 6 bikes off Craigslist and sold probably 5 or 6 bikes off Craigslist. And usually that's more local, and that's really helped. That's really a good thing to sell from. At least I like to be able to show the bike to people, and I like to be able to see the bike that I'm going to buy too. And often you find really good value, good deals on them. I spend half my year in Florida. I see an awful lot of recumbent bikes down there, a lot more than I do up here in northern Pennsylvania. So that's what I have.
All right, good. And thank you for bringing up Craigslist. That was one of the things on my list of things to mention. We hadn't mentioned that yet. And Doug, I'm interested in what you have to say. The last thing on my list actually was recumbent shop consignment or trade-in stock kind of thing. So you're just a guy to talk to about that. I'm not sure if that's where you were going with this, but could you talk about that too?
Unmute.
You have to unmute yourself, Doug. Doug's been on so much today that his voice is completely
well, I was
lost.
coughing a minute ago and eating
there you
something.
go.
So there you go.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I wasn't thinking about that in particular, but I'll cover it. Yeah, a lot of the recumbent shops take the consignment. We do that for sure. The rate structure is pretty reasonable, and then you get you get into our advertising ecosystems. You can get posted along with the regular bike shop ads, and we do use the Facebook and BentRider forums for consignment bikes, so you can see stuff that we've got out there. But that brings me to what I was going to mention, which was when you're buying online or sight unseen, the bike shops can be a resource, particularly recumbent specialty shops. You can ask your seller to have it checked out by a bike shop. They do charge money for this, but it's not too much. And then the bike shop can tell you what's going on with the bike. So if there's anything issues, the mechanics of the bike shops can typically make you aware of them and then let you negotiate that with your seller. And they also can pack them for shipping. You'd be surprised that we get bikes coming in from places that have been packed, and just trust me on this. The local UPS store could do a pretty good job on some things. They're not good at packing bikes to make sure they come back in one place. So come back in in one piece. So have a bike shop pack it, unless your buyer is really good at this or willing to take the liability on it. And again, have the bike shop, especially recumbent shop in particular, check out the bike for you to give you details about what's going on.
Very good. Yeah, great points there. The shipping and packing, which is something that people do a lot. So thank you for that, Doug. All right, folks, I think we're going to end that segment now. And thanks to you guys for helping me out there. And Larry, yeah, go ahead and put everybody else backstage here. And we're going to get on to Larry Varney's TerraTrike Spyder review. And Larry, everybody's going to have to be backstage except for me there. Yep. And don't forget to hit the Shift 8 as we get started here, and then we're going to have a look at what Larry and I saw when we went up to Grand Rapids, and Larry will talk more specifically about it. So let's do that, and let's hear from Larry.
Everybody, this is Larry Varney. I'm here to talk about the TerraTrike Spyder that Gary Solomon and I were lucky enough to go up and take a look at and ride. What I'm going to do is talk in general about the Spyder. There are 2 different versions, what I'd call the regular one and the ATC, which is a little higher level. The things that they have in common and the differences, and I'll mention some of those things. you can judge for yourself in some cases which is important, which isn't. This is a performance trike. So people are going to be saying, well, how does it compare to such and such, which is also a performance trike? And we'll touch on that. The first day we were up there, I rode the performance, the ATC version. And on the second day, I rode the, quote, regular Spyder. And first day was on more of a trail that led through some more of sort of in town and then gradually getting a little out of town trail, mostly flat and everything. And, you know, nice trail and not very far from the TerraTrike factory. And the White Pine Trail that we rode on the second day is in Rockford, Michigan, a really nice looking little town. I thought to myself, as soon as I saw it, and the more I saw of it, I thought, I'm going to have to come back here again because it looked really nice. And the trail rode right along the river from the town out into the country. And at the start, there was this dam that was sort of ovally shaped and water pouring over it. And there were places for people to sit at picnic tables and stuff. And I thought, this is probably very popular in the summer. I mean, you know how I am when it comes to taking pictures. I wanted to stop and take pictures practically at every stretch along the river. It was when that, to the point when I was riding it, that I noticed it had direct steering, which is nice, you know, it's more responsive and so on. But there's no suspension either. Very seldom will you find a performance bike or trike with suspension. And depending on how the construction is that going to make it like really, really rough? Well, I didn't have a chance to ride over like really bad cobblestones or anything. But in general, there were a few bumps here and there. And both the regular version and the ATC Spyder didn't seem especially harsh. The frames have sort of a built-in, I guess you'd call it, suspension, but no actual suspension. So if you live in a really rough area where there's lots of bad roads and so on, yeah, that'll be something you want to consider. These two trikes do not have suspension. It's not an option, but for normal riding and all that, it's probably not necessary. It's a two-piece aluminum frame design. Now, the ATC version does use carbon fiber in places where the regular Spyder uses just aluminum. It's 7000 series aluminum too, by the way. But starting at the front and working our way back, you've got on the basic version, the Shimano 105 crankset. Also Shimano bottom bracket and derailleur. Now, the seat height, as we're going back further, is 9 inches, but that bottom bracket height, which maybe I should have mentioned before, but it's up near the front, 13.5 inches. So you can figure out, okay, I'm kind of like about a 4-inch difference between the seat height and the bottom bracket height. Some people I know don't like a big difference between the two. 22 speeds. We got 11 cogs in the rear and 2 chain rings in the front. The gear inches, as it comes from the factory, has a low of 27 inches and a high of 122. So you can tell right there what they're aiming at. This is not going to be designed for really steep mountain riding, because that 27-inch granny, maybe if you had a assist, but I know I'd have problems climbing steep mountains with a 27. And the 122, that's going to give you some really high speeds on the top end. So wheels, as I mentioned, there is some differences between the ATC, the higher version, and the regular Spyder. They both have 20-inch wheels in the front and a 700 in the rear. And again, you have a lot alloy wheels on the regular version and carbon fiber on the ATC. When we're looking again at the wheels, the track width is 30 inches. Now, the overall width is a little bit wider, 33 inches, but not much. The total length of the trike is 81 inches. One of the things that really surprised me when I inquired about the specifications and everything, it's something that other people sometimes ask out on BentRider online or Facebook or whatever. They'll say, well, I need to lose some weight. Can this trike handle my weight? Well, according to the TerraTrike website, they list the weight limit of 280 pounds. Now, that's a lot. One other quote dimension that I always find interesting is the turning circle. How sharp of a turning circle does it have? For a lot of people, they'll say, yeah, big deal. I can turn at a street corner or whatever. It's no big deal. But some people who do a lot of, say, trail riding, those trails aren't as wide as a regular road. So the turning circle does matter to them more so than to others. So it's got a turning circle of 19 feet. That's another one of those things that when you're comparing this trike to other trikes and saying, which one do I prefer, turning circle might make a difference. Now, I did mention the some of the differences already between the ATC and the regular carbon fiber rims. Oh, the boom is carbon fiber too. And the seat. People have probably seen pictures already and they say, the ATC, the higher version, has hard shell seat, carbon fiber. The regular Spyder has a mesh seat, aluminum. I do have to say that I rode on both. I like both. The ATC has a Ultegra / GRX, also from Shimano, rather than the 105. The carbon fiber equipped ATC is about 5 pounds lighter than the regular version. It's a little under 30 pounds, and the other is a little over 30 pounds. So it's not the lightest trike I've ever seen, but still pretty good there. So, again, it's one of those things, performance, whatever, it's going to make a difference to you. So how does it compare to the other performance trike, Trike 700 and the ICE VTX? It's going to be difficult to compare these three trikes without actually having them handy to use. I just have to say that they're very similar, and it's a really nice thing to say that people can look at this trike and what do they compare to? What do they want to look at? Two of the better performance trikes out there, the Trike 700 and the ICE VTX. So, yeah, they are in the league together. Whether or not one is going to be much better than the other, again, it's going to be up to you. The normal, regular, I keep calling it the regular Spyder, whatever you want to call it. The list price is $3,999. We can call it $4,000 just to round it off. And the ATC, it retails for $5,599. So we'll round that to $5,600. So there's like a $1,600 difference between the higher class model, the one with the higher level components, 5 pounds less weight, carbon fiber, hard shell seat, and so on. As I mentioned, Gary Solomon and I went to Michigan. We got a lucky break. The weather was good, and we got a couple of days that we could spend riding. Now, I prefer reviewing something much longer term than that. So here's hoping spring will come sooner than normal, and that somehow or another a miracle will happen, and I will get a long-term review Spyder sent to me.
Yeah. A not so subtle plea by Larry Varney to TerraTrike to send him one for longer term. Larry, you want to bring Larry Varney up for me, please? There we go. Larry, so great. We had a good time up there, didn't we?
It was a little cooler on that second day than what I liked. And I kept thinking, I wish I'd have brought some gloves. But other than that, it was a great time. Interesting people to talk to. I was very impressed, like I even said in the video, with that trail, with the river and everything. I kept thinking, I'm coming back here sometime, and I do plan on it because that looked like a neat place.
For sure. All right. We had a few questions, mostly revolving around comfort.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Now, you did say in the review that you rode both seats, of course. The higher end is the hard shell seat, and the lower end is the mesh seat. And you said you liked them both, but could you be a little more specific? Did you find them both comfortable? Did you find one more comfortable than another? What'd you find?
Well, it's one of those things that with a mesh seat, I think it's more, I don't know, it can fit the backside of almost anybody a little better. So chances are everybody's going to like the mesh seat. And the hard shell seat, it's not going to, quote, give with it, obviously. So that's one that I would suggest to anybody. sit on it. You got to go try it out yourself because it may just hit your shoulders wrong, something. In this case, though, I really did think that both seats felt good. Both days I had no problems. I wasn't like, moving around thinking, oh, this is horrible. I liked them both. Other than the fact that the hardshell seat weighs less, being carbon fiber and all that, I don't know which one. If somebody say, which one do you prefer? I don't know. I like them both. So I think that when it comes down to it, give it a shot yourself. And if you can't find one to test out, that you can't try it out, just to be on the safe side, you might want to go with the mesh seat instead of the hard shell, because you don't want to buy something, have it arrive in the mail, and think, oh God, I don't like this seat. So
very good. Okay. Yep. Thanks, Larry. And just a note, I have noticed a number of dealers that I'm in touch with do seem to be getting at least some supply of the Spyders out there now. So perhaps our viewers will actually have a little bit better chance than we think to try them out. Always the best choice is to do it, to try it out yourself. So, Larry, thank you so much for all your contributions today, including going up to Grand Rapids with me. We had a great time. Thanks a lot.
It was great. Thank you.
All right, guys. All right, we're heading into the home stretch here. We next up have a video from our pal Peter Stull, who is always looking to see the best way to transport the trikes and the other sorts of bents. So, Larry, let's have a look at Peter's video.
Hi, I'm Peter from the Bicycle Man, and today we've got two of the Performer Hero trikes, and we want to put them in this van. Now, the Performer Hero is a fairly large trike. It has a 26-inch rear wheel, and it doesn't fold. So how do you carry a trike like that? Well, it turns out if you have a van, you're in good luck. So first I'll get one. I'll take the parking brake off, the first one, and I'll put it in front wheels first. Later, I'll put the parking brake on so it doesn't roll around in transit. The other one will go in rear wheel first. And voila, they fit very well. Now, if you want to take 4 people with you, or if you want to take 4 trikes, then you should have folding trikes. But if you have a van and you can take the seats out, you don't really need folding trikes. Personally, I carry an Avenue trike in the back of my Toyota Prius, and I don't fold it. But the Avenue is a little smaller. It has a 20-inch rear wheel. The 20-inch rear wheel shortens the bike by about 1/2 foot, a little more maybe. And I just take the seat off and adjust the handlebars, and in it goes. So now we got the 2 trikes in the car, but we're going on a trip. We're going to have luggage. What are we going to do? Well, I'm glad you asked, because we have some simulated luggage here. We'll start with this. I know you don't usually bring a trash can, but you know how big it is, right? Put that there. That can go there. That could go there. And we'll sneak around to the side door and get tricky. One goes there. One goes there. And you notice, if you were bringing duffel bags, which my wife and I do when we're bringing trikes, you could stack duffel bags on top of the trikes. The seats are both empty. There's tons of room left in this van for things that are smaller than, I mean, I got some pretty big things in there. I mean, fairly big things fit in there. So there's quite a bit of luggage space. The downside, one time my wife and I were on a trip and we had a Subaru Outback with 2 trikes in it. And we went for a ride. So we pull up to the trailhead
in Pennsylvania, and we get out all the bags and we take out the trikes, we put all the bags back in, close up the car, lock up, go for a ride. We get 5 miles away and it starts to rain. So we race back to the car. We get to the car. Now it's raining fairly well. We open the car, get all the bags out in the rain, put the trikes in, put the bags back in. So it's a little inconvenient, but it works and you can do it. And we had, with the Outback, we had 2 adults and all our luggage for a week-long trip and 2 folding trikes. So, and we had plenty of space. It wasn't real tight. So there you have it, 2 large non-folding trikes in a minivan. Thank you.
Hello.
There we go. Peter, how's it going?
Good.
All right. So once again, you stuffed more Bents into more vehicles. What do you got coming up next time? Are you working on anything now?
Well, one thing we're working on is we're going to have a better selection of luggage to put on top of them when we're done.
Yeah, I had no idea you had that many trash cans, actually. So
yeah, well, we didn't get the big ones out from out back.
All right. Well, Peter, thanks a lot for that.
No
great
problem.
segment.
We're going to borrow different employees and customers' cars. So as the selection of vehicles changes, we'll be very opportunistic and grab a vehicle that we haven't seen before and put some trikes and bikes in it. So
sounds good. All right, pal. You take care, and we will see you next time.
See you
Okay,
later.
guys.
Bye.
Very good. Let's finish it off then with Denny's sports report. Larry, if you want to get him started.
This month, I want to give you a heads up on a couple of upcoming events of interest to the recumbent community. First up is Bike Sebring, a 100, 12, and 24-hour race. This was the first event of the American Endurance Race season. Now it's the second event on the calendar, but it's still an event with a very high attendance and a very competitive field. The race gets entries from all over the country and occasionally around the world. Normally, the race is held around Valentine's Day, but this year it will be a week later, February 19th and 20th. One of the unique features of this race is that all racers do at least 3 laps on the famous Sebring racetrack, though the 12 and 24-hour racers will do many more. Weather in February in Florida can be fickle. I've ridden this race several times, and while there's almost always wind, the days are usually in the 60s or better. Starting with those 3 laps on the Sebring racetrack, the riders head on to the open road for an out and back of another 90 miles. The Century riders finish on the Sebring racetrack parking apron, and the 12 and 24-hour racers continue on the open road 11.7-mile loop. Finally, after 5:30 in the afternoon, the race continues on the racetrack for the final hours of the 12 and 24-hour race. The race is very recumbent friendly, and in 2020, it was chosen race of the Recumbent Manufacturers Challenge. There is still time to plan to attend, and I hope to see you there. Next is a unique opportunity to compete in the National Senior Games. The games come to Fort Lauderdale, Florida in May. What makes them unique is the first time they will allow recumbent bikes in the time trial races. As a bonus, you don't have to qualify in a regional event to compete. Recumbent racers will be able to compete in the 5K time trial May 18th and the 10K time trial May 19th. Recumbents will be a separate category, and 2 and 3 wheels will be a separate division. Open early discounted registration ends January 26th, and open registration closes March 1st. Consult the website nsga.com for more precise information. That's it for this month. Until next time, stay on the bike and keep moving forward. Back to you, Gary.
Thank you, Denny. All right, let's end up here with our sincere thanks to our sponsors, who are TerraCycle. From fairings to headrests, whatever accessory you need, Pat and crew have you covered. And Trailside Trikes. If you find yourself in Florida near the Withlacoochee Trail or in Knoxville, Tennessee, check out Andrew's shop and amazing crew. And Cruise Bike. Their patented race and record-proven front-wheel drive geometry changes the rules of cycling. Now, comfort doesn't come at the cost of performance, but fair warning, your cheeks may hurt from smiling. And TerraTrike and Greenspeed trikes. Your vision, whatever it is, TerraTrike has a trike to take you there. And Greenspeed, the cutting-edge designs create performance through Aussie ingenuity. And Laidback Cycles, the top USA dealer for TerraTrike and the premier source for Catrike, Ice, and Greenspeed. We give you the freedom to ride. And Recumbent CycleCon. We've postponed the 2021 Recumbent CycleCon trade show and convention, but please join us on October 8th and 9th, 2022 at the Montgomery County Fairgrounds in Dayton, Ohio. For more info, find recumbentcyclecon.com. All right, guys, we will have our next laid-back bike report. Let's see, slated for January 9th of 2022. That's right. New Year coming up, 2 p.m. Eastern time, as always. And we're working on that show right now. We'll announce more about it as time goes on. Now, how can you support the Laid Back Bike Report? If you've liked what you've seen today, we would appreciate any help you can give us. Now, that involves things like liking us on Facebook, subscribing to our YouTube channel, and clicking that little white eye up there, which will take you to the laidbackbikereport.com website where lots more information is available. And of course, our wonderful Patreon patrons here who support us with monthly financial help as little as $1 a month. We love our Patreons. Thank you so much. All right, guys, let's bring everybody back on stage for a goodbye. Wonderful show. I hope everybody in the audience enjoyed it as much as we all enjoyed putting it on. You guys did a fantastic job. Thanks for all your contributions, especially Doug. This time, that was a great segment, and we look forward to working with you more on that. But that's it for all of the panelists and guests today. So thank you guys, and most of all, folks, I want to thank you all for watching and supporting us every month. We couldn't do it without your support. So until our next webcast, from all of us here at the Laid Back Bike Report, so long, Bent Riders.